like to begin by sharing something with you. This is a residential building not far from where I live. Perhaps looks like any other residential building in the locality, but if you look at it closely, you might observe something that piqued my interest. Now, I want to be clear, I don't know who designed this building or who built it or who indeed lives in it. But I couldn't help but wonder, how is it that something like this could have happened? And I'm pretty sure this doesn't happen in every architectural project or in every scheme. If you were to look up architecture using Google Images, for instance, you might find what I think are quite predictable results. Iconic buildings by legendary architects, for instance, ideas of creative genius. And you have to wonder if an architectural faux pas could ever happen in projects of such caliber. I don't know if the gentleman whose car started to melt because of the sunbeams apparently bouncing off of this building was too happy. And if you were to juxtapose these two together, which I think in itself is a little bit unfair, considering that they are projects of a vast gradient in terms of scale and complexity, there is something in common. And what is it that slips into the blind spot? What is it that gets missed out? That's something I've been trying to understand for some years. We might have to go back a little bit to understand this fully. In 1980, an urbanist by the name of William H. White led a project and published a book called The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. This was part of a documentary he created. His objective was to try and understand what did and didn't work with the plazas and open spaces in New York. His technique was simple. He positioned cameras in high places, conducted interviews, basically objectively and passively documented people going about their lives in these public spaces, in these environments. He wanted to see how people interacted with their architectural environment. And his techniques have since been used in a number of different projects, and I have tried to apply them myself in two different locations, and I'm going to share that with you today. Let's look at the first one. Let's look at Ektanagar. Ektanagar is located in Mumbai, in Kandivali, not too far from where I used to live. I spent a year walking around in this neighborhood, understanding how the community and the architecture operated. And what I found for the most part was that this is an informal settlement with a lot of informal trade happening here. Most of it operates from these mixed-use residences, packed tightly together in these very small plots of land, with the trade often happening on the ground floor and the residences on the first floor. A lot of the people living there are migrant workers. And considering that space is a premium in Mumbai, this neighborhood is very short of it, and they have tried to make the most of whatever space is available to them and whatever technical tools and methods are available to them. Which is why I found it fascinating that despite this obvious crunch and this constraint of space, they have made allowance for these shared community spaces between the houses, often like courtyards with houses cluttered around them. One of them in particular caught my attention. I spent a lot of time visiting this courtyard different times of the year, and depending on when I visited, which time of the year that is, something different used to be going on there. Sometimes it was used for the morning aarti, sometimes it was used for Navratri Garba, sometimes it was used for the elderly socializing amongst themselves, and like in this picture, sometimes as a playground. There's a real spirit of community in the neighborhood. And this locality followed an architectural and aesthetic language of its own. No two houses were exactly alike. They were similar but not identical. Each one had been tweaked to suit the functional and demographic requirements of the people living in it. This language was molded around the social and cultural fabric and the functional and technical requirements of these people. It was like a customized neighborhood. There was no clear central plan. If we were to try and trace back the origin of every house, we might find it difficult to find a clear program. They seem to have organically evolved, each one on its own time, with whatever little tools and resource was available to them. And I found this intriguing and admirable. Which is why it was a little bit disappointing that for a locality with such a strong cultural identity and such a strong economic presence, its representation in pop culture is almost non-existent. The sad part is that if you were to look at these buildings in this image, they could be anywhere in the country, and we may not necessarily be able to tell the difference. For context, a lot of these high-rise buildings are across the road from Ektanagar, in that area circled in blue. I thought this was such a literal representation of the class divide. So what is the difference between Ektanagar and its neighboring high-rise towers? I would agree that the high-rise buildings offer much greater structural robustness and integrity and better sanitation requirements perhaps. But Ektanagar seemed a lot more democratic in its constitution. To put it simply, the high-rise towers are built first and inhabited later. But Ektanagar was almost inhabited first and built along the way. This is to meet the specific requirements of the people who came here from various parts of the country. And this is when I first started to get a glimpse of the blind spot. Let us look at another location. Millennium Square is located in Bristol in the UK. It is a public space with a few very interesting architectural features. I decided to adapt William White's techniques to this location, specifically for two architectural features that caught my attention and which I feel have become synonymous with the identity of this location. There's this large steel-clad Imaginarium to the northwest and the Aquarina water feature to the southeast. Let's look at the Aquarina first. Now, Millennium Square has a number of different water features, and much like most of the others, I personally wasn't very surprised with my observations of this water feature. They seem to have a real point of intrigue for the visitors, and while the adults who visit this location will approach the water with a sense of hesitancy and trepidation, perhaps some of which is sort of coached into us during the course of a lifetime, children seemed a bit more authentic in their interaction with the water. And William White has a similar conclusion in his book, where he says one of the best things about water is the look and feel of it. You can't put water in front of people and expect them not to touch it. And I agree. In fact, it was pleasantly surprising when I juxtaposed my findings against some of what he published in his book. When I looked at these two images, it's worth mentioning here that the time and space between them was quite intriguing to me. And as obvious as this might seem, this is something that unites us as a species. Regardless of location, regardless of time, these two images have almost 5,000 kilometers and 30 years between them. But our instinctive response to elements is by and large the same. Which is why I found it a bit absurd when I noticed these plaques put up on site. I hope whoever put it up didn't intend for it to be taken seriously, because it's not. And as for the Imaginarium, the large steel-clad sphere to one end of the site, that was a lot simpler. Regardless of time of day, regardless of time of year, regardless of month, regardless of the age, gender, ethnicity of the people who were visiting it, the response to this feature was exactly the same. They looked at their reflection and they took a picture, even myself. It's worth remembering here that this is by no means the only architectural feature or work of art that has had this kind of reaction from people. Famously, Cloud Gate in Chicago by Sir Anish Kapoor has had a very similar experience since the day it was opened. And when I look between these two sites now, between Ektanagar and Millennium Square, what's common between them? How we perceive our architectural spaces, how we perceive our environments, depends on our collective psychology. And how we use them depends on that as well. And if given an opportunity, we will mold our spaces to suit our requirements, both functional and mental. I decided to explore this further and attempt at applying this in an academic project. Let's look at Parsons Street train station. This is located in Bedminster in Bristol. It's like any other train station, 2 platforms, 2 stairs leading onto them and an overbridge. And the brief here was fairly simple, to change the use and hopefully the perception of the station for people in the community, especially for the children who studied at a school nearby. I felt that for this exercise, I could use the learnings from the previous case studies from Ektanagar and from Millennium Square. And I decided to focus just on the stairs. There was a particular disdain towards these features because they were often dark and gloomy and the lights didn't always work. And the trouble here was that I couldn't design something to be built because of a minuscule budget. So I started to experiment with ideas that might perpetuate movement. That's something that is often used with designs of stairs by various different architects to kind of guide you in using it a certain way and to promote navigation. But the trouble here was that this staircase was always very dark. And the challenge wasn't to demolish them and build something new or add something onto them architecturally, but to change perception. How would I be able to change perception for something that is plunged in the darkness? It's funny what you can achieve with a can of glow-in-the-dark paint. These are prototypes I designed to regenerate these stairs, and not just to how they are perceived, but how they are used, to change behavior around them. So they didn't come across as dark and scary, but sort of exciting and something that people around the neighborhood would want to use. And I was wondering if something like this would actually work in the real world. Part of me thought this is just an academic project. A year later, I discovered this in the news. Now, I do not know who designed this solution, brilliant as it is, but it was interesting to see that when presented with a challenge to affect behavior in a certain way, 2 people in very different locations came with similar design outcomes. It almost seems like when trying to affect psychology, our location and origin and ethnicity doesn't matter. And this is where I started to get a clear picture of the blind spot. That what unites us as a species is our psychology, because it is deeply rooted in our evolutionary background. How we instinctively respond to elements, how we crave a social community, our interaction with our physical environment. These are all historic facts, and that makes them extremely reliable. Our psychology influences how we use our spaces. And if it is factored in mind while designing our physical environment, while designing our architecture, our buildings can have a profoundly positive impact on our mental and physical well-being. We can argue about the policies of Winston Churchill, but I agree with him on this, that there is no doubt about the influence of architecture on our lives. We make the buildings and then they make us. However, when architecture devolves from being an art that is meant to be driven by our mental, physical and psychological requirements into being a mindless activity, deconstructed into its components, each one grossly oversimplified into the production of sterile spaces, we are looking straight at the blind spot and keeping our eyes closed. Any space that fails to accommodate our psychological needs, that fails to become the right environment for our mind, can never transcend into becoming a place. It is certain to fall victim to the passage of time because it fails to rely on the one thing that unites us as a species, something that is time-proof. And when we strip our users of their individuality and we consign them into pigeonholes, convinced that they don't deserve any better. We can't act surprised when we end up with a society that is angry and repressed. The role of psychology in building healthy environments is indisputable. And it is the biggest blind spot of this industry, in my opinion. Because we are not looking something in the face. This is not something we are looking at. We are it. The question is that now that we have this awareness and we have the power to influence it, what are we going to do? Thank you for listening.